to on-the-spot movie reviews. Obviously, we're on the go because we're trying to make the showing of Tron Legacy in Imax 3D. I love this film. This is a childhood film for me. I saw this in the movies when I was 11 years old, and I saw it twice. I didn't know what I was seeing the first time, and second time I saw it in California. It was the first movie I ever saw by myself, and that's when the movie just clicked with me. And it was also the first video disc I ever owned, so for a while I only had this movie, and I'd watch it over and over, so I can recite it backwards and forwards. That being said, I'm not one of these people that I'm going to go in saying, if this movie is not good, my childhood's ruined or something like that. You know, it's hard to judge it's hard to judge a film that you grew up with critically, but when I really do look at the original film, as much as I love it for the reasons that I love it, I know that the script is a little cheesy, you know, the dialogue's a little corny. The amazing part about it is the world that they created and the concept of somebody going into the world. And some of the other best parts about the original movie are Jeff Bridges, because I didn't know who he was at the time, and I always remember leaving the theater going, this movie should have been called Flynn instead of Tron. That was his character's name, because he really left an impression with me. In terms of the screenwriting too, I know I've occasionally written things, and I've accidentally written the Tron line because it's just so easy for me to recall the whole script in my head. So I'm really excited to see it. The basic concept of this sequel, the original was about Jeff Bridges' character. He's a video game programmer, and this company called Encom has stolen all of his video games and kind of released them without giving him the credit for it. So he's fired, and essentially he goes back to the company to retrieve the evidence. When that happens, he gets sucked into the computer, and he's inside the computer world, and we see what it might be like to be part of that world, to be a program, to be a bit, to be in the video game. So that's the concept of the original movie. This movie is a sequel, has to do with his son looking for his father who went missing 20 years ago, and what we get, the idea that he may be in the video game world and his son is going to go in there after. So that's the basic concept of what I know of the film. So as you can see, I'm very excited, and I can't wait to see it.
So I saw the original Tron once when I was younger, and I didn't really like it. It didn't make an impression on me at all. As an adult, being with Rich, he says that it's one of his favorite movies. So I saw it again. Again, I wasn't impressed with it at all. I thought that it was interesting, but like I'm not excited by the trailer. I'm not excited by the movie. I'm going to see it to be supportive and to be a good wife, and we'll see what I think.
Now that reaction too is not really surprising to me, because when the movie did first come out, I thought it was considered a bomb. Like, I know the first time I ever saw the movie, we were in a theater in Brooklyn, me and Tony didn't understand what we saw, and I remember the audience seemed like they just hated it. They were just kind of making fun of it and heckling it. It is funny to hear people now talk about Tron, because I'm always surprised that people even know what it is. That it can be a very polarizing movie. It's not for everybody, and especially if you just don't get it. And for its time, the movie was very innovative. It was the first feature film to ever use computer animation, which now is like a nothing to think about. Every movie has computer special effects, even if it's just something like wire removal or fixing an actor's makeup in a drama. I said I'll be very anxious to see, you know, what fans of Tron really tried to create.
Well, besides being very, very cold, here's my review. Okay, I thought it was better than the first movie for a lot of reasons. Well, the graphics were definitely more modern, obviously, which made it visually easier for them to express, I think, a lot of the things that they wanted to express in the first one when the technology wasn't there. And I think that now, I think that all people are a little bit more computer savvy. That being said, there were still a lot of things that I thought were very confusing, if they were real terms or if they were made up. It was really hard for me to figure out. And to me, that sort of isolates the audience a little bit. The good parts of Tron were because of Jeff Bridges, and Jeff Bridges, I think, is just a phenomenal actor, and I think that if he wasn't in it, like, it would be harder to enjoy this movie. The character that plays his son, I thought that he also was very good. Overall, I thought it was fun, but I feel like with the other Tron, it distanced itself. You don't really feel you understand the whole world and the concepts and what the consequences are. But at the end, I'm not really sure what the outcome of this digital world was and some of the characters at the end of the movie. And so when you don't know how it ends, but sometimes I do like that. I don't want to say that categorically that makes it not good. I just felt it was too confusing, especially at the end. They had a disclaimer at the beginning of the movie saying that the movie intentionally went from 3D to 2D. It was well done enough that I never noticed when it went from 2D to 3D. And I don't recommend this movie to everybody. If you were a Tron fan, they stayed true to the original in a lot of ways, and I think that you might be pleased. But we'll see what I mean, I'm not a true Tron fan. That's my experience as an outsider, so we'll see what Rich says, who is the true Tron fan.
What you're saying is almost identical to the way me and Tony first felt when we left the original film back in 1982 when we walked out of the theater. Was a lot of confusion, a lot of snickering, and just kind of a lot of, I don't know what I saw. It was interesting, but I'm not sure what I liked. And like I said, only when I saw it the second time, and then over the years seeing it over and over and over and over again, that I really get an understanding what that movie is. And what I loved, and I'll say that, I loved the sequel to this movie. I thought it was a great sequel because what I felt when I was watching it was, it brought me back to when I first saw the original, and in terms of the tone, in terms of the feeling, and I felt like the filmmakers really did their best to try and get the feeling of the original film, and especially to connect it in a certain way. Like usually when you see a movie that's made 30 years later, like I'll use this example, which is a completely different genre. When you first saw The Hustler, which is about a pool player with Paul Newman, and then you saw The Color of Money, which was a sequel to that movie, which took place 30 years later, and it was Paul Newman was the only character, and everybody, Tom Cruise and everybody else around it. It really was a different movie, a different tone, and it was just kind of like the 80s version of that story, just continuing. What I was kind of thinking that this is what that movie was going to be, where they were kind of going to take Tron into the future and try to, you know, fancy it up a little bit with story-wise and all that. They kept, and what surprised me is that they didn't at all. They kept the same somber tone, even though in the original Flynn, Jeff Bridges' character is like a very funny character throughout. He's the only light part of the original movie. The movie's a very dark movie. The tone is a very dark and sad movie in a way, which was probably a weird thing for a Disney movie at that time, which was more of a kids movie, to be. This one is PG-13, so they've kind of moved up, but it has that same tone. I still had that same feeling. There's this like sadness to it, and the world is still dark. You know, the other thing that I had heard people worried about was that they're going to make Tron and they're going to make it very futuristic, and it's not going to resemble the other world. It resembles it almost like the same way, like when you look at pictures of Times Square from back in the 60s to like Times Square now, where it's so modern and things look different, but there's still elements of it that are the same. So I really liked what they did with the characters. I like what they did with Bruce Boxleitner's character of Alan. They could have so easily just shoved him in the corner, you know, not even bothered with that kind of detail. And there's even another character that's not even an important detail. Only if you're a fan of the original movie would you even make the connection. Applaud the filmmakers for what they did, which was kind of a love letter to the original film. Basic storyline of Flynn's son, Jeff Bridges' son, going into the computer world and finding his father and finding out what his father's been doing. You know, that's really the crux of the story, and finding out what's happened to this world after all these years later, and what Flynn has been doing in there all this time. The world is still the same, it just evolved. I recommend it to Tron fans. I think somebody who's not a Tron fan or hasn't seen the original might like parts of it and might find it interesting, but they also might be confused. And that's what I really appreciated about this film, is that they really took their time to set up scenes and do scenes that were just for people who love the original film. And if you're going to go see Tron, go see it in IMAX. Those same scenes were specifically shot in IMAX, and you do see the difference.
This is another on-the-spot movie review. Thanks for listening to us talk about Tron, and we will see you next time.